Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Stimming and Stilettos with Dr. Tasha. And yeah, y'all, I am back, and we have a new episode with a new woman of color in STEM. And I am equally as excited as you all to learn more about today's guest. And I usually just like to say hi. So, hi, Winnie, how are you?
Hi, Dr. Anderson. I'm doing well. How are you?
I am, oh, man, I'm excited. Okay, so say your last name. So again, so I won't mess it up, and then we can get it started.
Winnie Karanja.
So it's Winnie Karanja. Um, and y'all heard it from me. I didn't mess up. I'm so proud of myself. Because you guys know I've been known to mess up plenty of names on the show. And her story, so only the little pieces that I've read. So because we've never met. So this is a wish that was granted via LinkedIn, hallelujah for LinkedIn. And so, and as my viewers know and my listeners know, like I'm a LinkedIn stalker. I call myself. I like to just see other women in STEM doing great things. And anytime I see somebody who I'm like, I think she'd make a great guest on the show. And so then I will do an introduction. Here's who I am. Here are links to the past episodes. Here's how we can link up if you're interested in being a guest on the show. And I'm really grateful and glad that you said yes.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm really excited for the conversation. So thank you for reaching out.
Anytime, anytime, because I collect friends. I collect friends. So you just never know.
Don't we all?
I mean, I feel like we're in a space as women of color in STEM where there's not so many of us that we can't all be familiar, right?
Exactly.
Um, and so, and because you never know, like when you'll need a speaker or you'll need someone to, be your hype man. It's like I'm for it. I can do it. And I make myself available for those opportunities. And like I make no bones about it. Like this is my job, right? I love promoting and sort of equalizing women of color in STEM, because for me it's never been about whether we could do the jobs and have all of the skills. It's about opportunity. So
Exactly. And I think it's so important to just build a community. Like there's not that many of us in this space. And so just being able to connect with each other, serving as a support group, just being able to be in that community is critical, even if it's just a virtual community. It's key for us to thrive, celebrate one another as women of color in this space, and then hold each other up as well. So
yeah,
yeah, I'm excited to be a part of this community here with you. So thank you.
you are so welcome. So Winnie, as I do with all of my guests, please tell us your STEM story.
Yeah. Well, so my STEM story, so I first was, I would say that I was in STEM as a young child, but I never called it STEM.
Mm,
I was great at math. I had my challenges of math, I'm going to be honest, but I loved it. And, I was very interested in the sciences and did well there. But I had a couple of roadblocks. So when I was in high school, I took it was my first ever programming course. And it was very interesting because I was in this class and I was one of two students of color and one of two female students in the course. And it was the environment of bro culture before I had the language of bro culture. So yes, like what I mean is that the blinds were almost always like pulled down like to the bottom. There's very little bit of like natural light. The lights were like there was only like one set of lights on, and I'm Kenyan American, and so I just was always thinking like, why do you all like not like natural light? Like I don't understand this, but I was in this course and, it was my first exposure to programming. And so I was there, I was building my website around one of my top tennis players. Obviously, like Serena is the GOAT. but I was a, high school, I was a teenager. So I built my website about Roger Federer. And in this process of building this website was when I realized that I was in a context where the white male students, they knew what they were doing and I didn't, right? They
Right.
had the language and the terminology and I didn't. And it
Mhm.
was just interesting because for me, like I found building a website a very creative process. And again, at that time, I never really thought about it as STEM. I just was like, this is a cool creative outlet for me. And so I built this website, and honestly, because I was dedicated to seeing my website come to life, like I kept talking to the teacher, asking him like, how do I, create this function? How do I make sure that my picture is aligned where I want it to be, etc. And so that was really that exposure into the tech space. And so I built this website. I had a great experience. And then when I went off to college, I was really blessed to go to school in the UK. So I did my undergrad in Wales. And when I was there, I was studying like education and international politics. And so through that work, I was able to work with some organizations, really marrying my passion around international development work and humanitarian crisis work with data. And so I was working with them to help them understand their data, make data informed decision making. That's when I started looking at like data structures. And so it really opened me up into this world. But again, I never thought about it through this lens of STEM. I just was like, this is something where we can use this to make better decisions, to make faster responses, to think about what's happening, what are the outcomes, And so that was really my journey. So I continued to be in this space. I wrote grants to work on various opportunities, research projects in the Philippines and back in Kenya. And then I ended up moving back to Madison, deferred my graduate school. Again, continue to just marry my passions for me in international development and humanitarian crisis work with data. And then went to graduate school, went to London School of Economics, and then returned back to Madison after that, Madison, Wisconsin. And that's where I was having a conversation with an educator, former elementary school principal, and she was telling me how she reached out to a national nonprofit and to teach her students how to code, and she had never heard back. And I was very perplexed by that because I was like, I don't understand what you mean, because like ensuring that students had the STEM skills, like I saw what being able to marry my STEM and tech skills, the doors that it opened up for me, the rooms that I was in. And I'm going to be honest, the rooms that I was in, I was in the UK, but like, and so I had a little bit more diversity, and like I created these projects that I wanted to work on. And those were all in Philippines, Kenya. So, being around people of color, but it was one of those things where I was like, students need to have access to these skills. And I don't understand why they never wrote back to you. And so I immediately told her, I will, teach your students how to code. And then I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute, let me just take a step back. Let me see. Cause I was so just like passionate. I was like, I don't understand like this, the math is not mathing right now. And so I said, let me look at an organization that is doing this. And so when I looked at that, I couldn't find one in the area that would actually be serving students beyond technical skills, right? Because it wasn't just the technical skills, it was the mentorship and it was exposure. And so that started my path of founding a nonprofit based in Madison called MADEM. And MADEM stands for a play on words around made by them, the phrase MADEM, made by them. And so we taught girls and students of color in rising 6th to 12th grade computer programming and getting them into tech-based internships. So I built that program, did that for 7 years, worked with over 2,000 students. We have students who learned how to code for their first time with me. And are at Stanford, applying to MIT, Columbia, all of these places, studying computer science. And then right before I left, I actually started a very unique, one-of-a-kind internship program, placing students in tech-based and engineering-based internships, getting paid $15 an hour. And these are high school students, getting paid $15 an hour.
And let me tell you,
managers, right? So this life-changing sort of experience, because for me, it was all about the fact that like students have the skill sets, right? We're just adding tools to their tool belt. And so I'm proud of what I built in Madison. And it was really from these experiences, was really from like the feedback from our corporations, our students, our parents, right? Because when I built the program, it was one of the it was the only program in Dane County that actually had more women and more than 50% like girls and students of color who were participating in STEM programming, right? Very, very
The
unique.
only one? When was this?
Let me tell you, I started this I launched it in 2015, and still when I left last year, yeah. And like, that's what I'm saying. And so it was, and I started, so even from my founder story, like when I started, Madam, I was maybe like, I was like the youngest Black woman in Dane County, like starting an organization, right? So the whole fundraising, there's so
Wow.
many things around, that part of the story, like being a young founder, being a Black founder, my intersectionality, being also Kenyan, all of these different things. But it's been amazing because a number of the students that we work with were first generation, and I really designed this program. Part of its success was the way in which I designed it from my experience, both as an immigrant, from my experience with background in education, and
Mhm.
how we brought parents into the mix, right? And one thing that, like I said, because the students we're working with, because of the way that I architect and created this model, we worked with a lot of corporations, and it was through that space where our outright program was really, teaching students these skill sets, but there was this other aspect of reframing for corporations where they believe that brilliance and talent lies. And
Ooh, now that's good. You got to say that again. No, I mean, because I think that that is actually really powerful. And it's actually part of the work that I really like to do is just, it goes back to, oh God, what was the Wells Fargo a couple years ago when they made
yeah.
that grand statement about how they couldn't find any diverse talent. And then people just started sending them resumes like, bam, here's,
Mhm.
here's a guy, here's a guy, here's a guy, right? Or here's a person, right? And all this, and it's like, okay, so are you really looking? And it really at the heart of it, it was like you were only looking in certain places because that's where you thought the talent and the gifting lied. And so
Mhm.
having them rethink that, shift, shake even that perspective that there's only certain people who have these gifts and talents that can do this job is vitally key. And I don't even know if I don't even think it's on purpose. It's kind of sort of conditioned to be this way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I
Mhm.
think there's so many levels, within that. I think it's, I think there's some things that are, within the conditioning. There's unconscious, but there's also conscious biases,
Of
right?
course. Yeah.
And it was those moments where, because that part of the program, even when I started the organization back in 2015, like it was, we would go into the corporations, we would create a meaningful experience there, and you'd see time after time, like folks be like, we don't we don't have women in our department. We have very few people. We don't have any people of color, looking around. And it was that reframing, because now it's the reorientation around like, wait a minute, we're engaging with these brilliant students of color, who are here, who are excited about STEM, and the folks who we have in our department don't reflect the students that we're working with. As we're thinking about who we're recruiting, wait a minute, how come they're not looking like,
Right. They don't match.
exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
that disconnect. And so it was through just that work, and again, a lot of the work that we did with parents, and where I saw there's such a need to take what I did and to scale it in different ways, but also to work at these various activation points, right? Because there's a lot of push to getting more people of color in the STEM field. But I remember something I was talking with, I would say she's a D&I practitioner, but we were talking about about the space, and she said something to me about like, how do you ensure that these corporations are ready to receive the brilliant talent?
Mm, that's
Because
the other
we can
side.
you know, exactly, because we can be talking about getting more women and people of color into that space, but we don't want to create a space where they're going to go and get harmed, right?
Right.
And so that's where there was this area of activation point, right, for me with corporations. There's this area of making sure that students at a very young age know that they belong in STEM and are engaging with tools and educational resources that reflect and look like them and talk about STEM in their own spaces.
Yeah.
And then as well, educating the broader community about the fact that women and people of color, and that we have been and we are at the pivotal points of like technology, innovation, and creation, right?
From
And
the very, very beginning.
exactly, exactly. And so for me, that those were the things I thought about, that alongside a few other things when I made my transition to leave Madam, to start my new company, Represent a Collective, that works in these various activation points, because it's not just one that's needed, it's all of them, right? And so to be able to create a company that works in these various spaces for me is critical. And so that's been my STEM journey. So I started Represent a Collective a year ago. And yeah, we create products and curate experiences focused on advancing gender and racial equity. So we have our legendary card collection that talks about women, specifically women of color, legends in the STEM fields. We curate experiences where we have these dialogues with women of color in the tech field about how do you create transformative spaces for women of color. We have a few other things that are coming out. And then we have our kids line called Nakira's World, which is the adventures of an 8-year-old Black girl and her friends in STEM. And so it's just these, like I say, these activation points that are so critical. And what I learned from what I, what I created and cultivated at Madam, and the impact that it had. I wanted to really take that and say, let's move this into large scale, because I think there's such an importance of direct service programs. But how do you go from working with 300 students 1 year to being able to have content that reaches, thousands of students, right? And works with the adults in their lives. So yeah.
And that is the challenge.
Yes.
I feel like our stories kind of crisscrossed, and they're very similar in ways. So I have questions.
Yeah.
One, I guess one is, I think is really important for other young women of color, but men also, is since you are a founder, how did you go about getting funding or sponsors for your programming? I mean, we got to talk about it, because I'm sure that you have stories there too.
Yes, let me tell you. It was a challenge. It was a challenge. So with all my intersectionality, it was something where when I brought this, like I said, so when I started so there's been 2 rounds. When I've started Madam in Madison, part of it was the fact that like I was bringing something, I didn't look like your typical founder.
Correct.
Right. And I was also communicating a message that people hadn't been hearing or thinking about, right? Like how do you get more girls and students of color in STEM? And so a lot of it had to do with, in terms of like getting funding, was, you kind of have the chicken and the egg situation, right? Like,
yeah. Which one first, right?
Which one goes first? And so I had to essentially, like in the beginning, what I did is I did consulting, and then sort of started the organization on the side. And then did like, was able to connect a little bit within the like in founder space, entrepreneur space, and got, a little bit of funding, and then did an event. And so I did this coding event in order to just like amplify the work, showcase it, get some press around it. And then from there, have conversations with folks, like find my sponsors and those who are going to like support my work, and then be able to ask them to introduce me to other folks, right? And so like the journey of raising money was, it was challenging, because you're raising money, it's, it's nonprofit, but also it's like we've only worked with 50 kids, right? Well, you have other organizations that have been there, have such a long history, and so they have those numbers. But what I'll say was really important for me was always collecting data from the beginning, was always doing those pre and post surveys. Like, we wrote grants, but I'll tell you, young founder, I worked with the university, got some interns, right? I didn't have dollars to be paying people. So, like,
Right.
being able to work with some college interns. And I'll say, like, one of my first intern, Valeria Martinez, like, she was such a rock star. Ended up working with her through this program, through UW-Madison. And then she was my first, one of my first full-time employee. And she worked with me for about 2 years. And so just being able to really, I think for me on that side was like build my team, but just go out, have conversations. There was a lot of, good luck with that.
Oh, that's so nice.
I'm like, okay. And I'm like,
Funny, but it's, yes.
mhm.
I felt that in such a way. It's so tricky. I don't even know if that's the word. It's just, it's hard. It's
It's
really
hard.
hard. Having done it for a little bit of time for quite similar, the same types of events, way back in the day. So I understand that it is, it's quite challenging in the
Yeah.
sense, I think the ground is much more fertile now, but it doesn't mean that it's any easier. What I find frustrating, and you can tell me if you've had this experience, is that I get frustrated with with when I see, events, or I see people who've gotten a lot of fundings, right? And they don't look like us. My friend calls them the translucents. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And I know that they don't, it's like they have they're trying to capture the same audience, but it's like, what's the motivate? Like, the motivation isn't there, right? I find that to be frustrating. Or if I, have been able to sort of check out or know their work, and know the quality of their work, I'm like, this isn't what we need, right? Our community, we need quality programming that is sustainable over time. Because it's not, for me anyway, this is the way I'm thinking about it. Because it's not a hit it and quit it event, right? If
Yeah.
we're going to make the investment, and we have to be all in, to me, in the investment of STEM technology in our company, I mean, in our country, in our community, because our kids sometimes they don't have the same resources. I can't say all of us don't have the same resources, but it can't be a hit it and quit it event here. And then 3 months later, another hit it and quit it event. We have to have these sustainable efforts over time, especially if we're going to be the stoker of interest and creativity and innovation. It's an everyday, every week kind of thing. You can't just come in here and be like, oh, we're gonna get 5 people who are, no, I'm tired.
Well, and that's the thing, and it's all about like impact, right? And so for me, I'll say that's something that, when I started, I realized like I had to do the small, like the short workshops. I knew, is
Sure.
that what's going to make the long-term impact? Not necessarily. And what I was looking at, because it needed that continual engagement, because with STEM and with programming, like, it's, when you do something and you write code and it works, you're like, great. But that moment where you get stuck and you get frustrated, you need to work through it,
Through
right?
it.
And
Yes.
so if you don't work through it, then you're like, okay, this is for like, this is hard, this is for me. Like, it isn't,
Right. I
I don't,
can't do this. This
and
is not my thing. Right.
right. And so that's what I wanted to avoid for. And so beginning for me, I think, it was doing some of that, and then making the decision to say, like, we're going to do, like, I'm going to do less and do quality over quantity, because especially, so I'll speak to this in a nonprofit space, and then I'll step outside of talking about it from a nonprofit space. But I think part of it is always the, like, when you're looking to, and you're working with funders or trying to figure out, like, how do you really, show the impact of your work, as a culture that's been grounded, you know, within America and whiteness and whatnot, there's a lot of like, it's the numbers, right? It's the quantity, like how many, what are you producing, right? It's
Mhm.
continuously like that. But like quality is what when we were working with students, it was that engagement. It was a working through it. It was that those smaller groups that
Right.
then, you know, allowed you to build the relationship, allowed students to work through things to figure out what about this excites them, right? Or where in STEM do they think that they would thrive even more, right? And so I'd say like that was a thing that I had to you know, I figured out and I worked through. And you know, even through that journey, like I've worked with some amazing, amazing funders, folks who are, you know, supporters and sponsors of Represent Collective, with my transition, who are just amazing. And I think people who realize that, especially when you're that, you know, when you're working with founders, when you're working within that space, like to trust the founder, to trust the leader. And like I said, I'm so thankful to be working with sponsors and corporations like that. And because of my work at Meta, because of, you know, who I am, like I have receipts, you know, to show that. But the journey of fundraising, like it is just, it's challenging because I think there's also the broader narrative of like, you should do the most with this little bit of money, right?
Mhm.
And so we're so used to having to do that. And at some point I was like,
No.
no,
Yes, I just know.
this little bit will get this. And so that's what's going to happen. Right. And I had to in my mind out of like, yes, I know I want to work with all of these students. I want to do all of this, but I'm like, when I look
Right.
at the numbers, it's like, this is all we can do with this.
Yeah.
And we want something that's quality and, you know, that reaches how many ever people, then this is the dollars. And so now I'm in a place where I think being confident in who I am, being confident in my work and the outcome of my work, it's like I have those conversations. And like I said, you know, I'm working within a community of funders who, you know, trust me, where I can show up in that way. And I think when you get there as a founder, it's really important. And I always encourage more, you know, funders or sponsors, to really trust the leaders that they're giving their dollars to, and to, you know, to ask about impact, but to, you know, to trust, not to ask for so many reports or all of those different things. And to know
Right.
like, okay, if somebody needs this is what they need, this is
Well, I mean, of course the numbers matter. I mean, but I would defer to, is that the word defer? Mm, maybe not. I think I wanted to say that you need both. Like you need those high, volume numbers where maybe you did impact or expose STEM to
Mhm.
1,500 students, right?
Mhm.
Because but you also need, I can see where you taking those same 20, 30 students that you've been working with throughout the year, every week, and using them in that same event where you impacted 1,500 students, right? Because to me, it's a both and, it's not an either or. So you use those students, or you take the things that they've learned, they showcase at the event, students can see themselves, because we know that that's important, right? So they can see themselves. Here's this young guy or this young girl who's learned how to code, who knows how to, whatever it is they've learned to do. And if I'm 7, I'm like, oh, if she can do it, I think I can too. Say, it's like, so there's ways in which you can do it where both sets of numbers matter. Like you have an impact, the impact you make over, if you've had a 4-week program or a 6-week program where you work with these 20, 30 students, that's gonna stick longer than maybe that one event where you had big numbers. To me anyway. So you can have them both, and it's just a matter of how you do it, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So that's sort of where I've aired. It's like one of those things where I went to a STEM event a couple of weeks ago, and it was a pretty decent. It's turned out pretty decent. And I thought to myself, okay, well now where's the follow up, right? because I mean, that's exactly where my mind went. I was there to do a parent session, uh,
Mm-hmm.
where I was talking to the parents about their role in STEM. Because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of parents are like, well, no, they're getting that at school, or that's the after school program. And it's like, well, as their parent, I'm not asking you to be great in math, because that's the thing that's like, oh, math terrifies me. I'm like, there's all of that. I'm not even asking you to get over your math fear. I'm not trying to tell you to do any of that stuff, but your role as a parent is, to support, is
Yeah.
to assist, is to become the helper, is to become the encourager, to, maybe find those free opportunities to sort of put yourself out there as the encourager of dreams, and the defender of your kid in that space, because you and I both know that being young, gifted, Black, in any space, as we currently stand, is difficult.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, like it was in seeing that where, and what I love about like our Nakira's World Puzzles is that it has a role for parents, right? And
Mhm.
the products that we're working on with possibilities boxes, that are in right now, they're in 2 schools in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They have this role for adults, and in a way that it's not intimidating. It's not
Right,
an intimidating entry point. Like when parents are doing these puzzles with their kids, and because it's a decoder puzzle, so you put it together, you put on your decoder glasses, you look for the hidden items. There's a booklet that tells you about the items that you're finding. And so it's introducing you to STEM, it's introducing you to, the sciences in a way that doesn't feel intimidating. And you don't actually realize that you're engaging in like STEM learning. And
right.
that intentionality, in making that entry point like effortless, for our customers, our consumers, is something that I think is so important, because then you create that place where parents aren't feeling intimidated. Like our possibilities boxes, we have a, so districts can buy it, or schools can buy it, but so it's a box, and then there's a booklet, there's the game, it's a game, and there's the lesson plans aligned to Common Core standards. And so for teachers, like it literally has the handouts for you in there. It tells you, when to introduce what point, which pages you have your kids read through,
Mm,
how much
that's
time you
good.
allocate for things. It's plug and play. And what we've heard from teachers is that they love it. What we heard from, some of our students as we did like pilots with them, in Madison, was like, every classroom needs this, and this looks like me. And so to be able to create that within STEM education is so critical for me. And that's what I love about this path with Nakira's World is, our products go from 4 years all the way through content that we have in elementary schools. So it's going to 5th grade. So it's like kids can grow with that, and you can continue to see people who look like you engaging with STEM in your everyday setting.
Yeah, love, love,
Yeah, so that's
love.
because I'm like, you do need that. You need parents to be able to support kids. You need to make it, easy entry, where you're like, oh, in the end, like, students are like, oh, this is the kind of butterfly or leaf that like is in this book and I just learned about. And they don't realize that like they're learning. They're like,
Yeah.
and ask them
Isn't
like,
that
oh,
the
is
best though? Like, even as an adult, you're like, oh, wait.
mhm,
It's like I mean, if you're like me, I'm sort of recently coming back around to the idea that I am always a student, right? I'm always a student. And so I mean, it's when I have those moments where it's just like, okay, I can, you can sit with the new knowledge, and for me, I get a little happy.
yeah. And let me tell you, as an entrepreneur, it's like you're gonna be a student until you
Right.
like you can't fight it. You can only fight it if you stop being an entrepreneur. But like entrepreneurship makes it that you will be a student
I
every
mean,
hour of the day.
you are not lying for sure. If I have learned nothing over the past, I've been in business for myself for 4 years now.
Mhm.
So it's been quite the endeavor, and I've I've made plenty of mistakes, right? I've learned a whole lot. I've learned, of course, what works for me,
Mhm.
and sort of putting in some back end processes has been probably the major work most of the time, and then focusing on what the front side looks like, and then making sure that my stuff is quality, right? That's been the work.
Yeah.
It's just,
Oh
I
yeah.
can't, because it'll show up later. I mean, honestly, it will show up later. People will be, will be like, oh, I engaged with her and it wasn't, I don't want that to be my story. So,
Oh,
um, and so I've done that work. So yes, and I'm always a learner. And I think that posture, that mindset has served me well as a Black woman in STEM for sure, but definitely as an entrepreneur.
yeah. And I think that's where for me, like I'm a big advocate for pay equity, for ensuring that there's capital for, Black owned businesses um and so because it's really important that we resource Black founders or founders of color with the capital that they need in order to create the product that they want to produce, right? So that
Mm,
you're not having to make small cuts here and there because you don't have, the financing to be able to make it happen, or the capital to be able to hire staff in order to do certain things, right? And I think that's what happens when we don't resource businesses.
mm,
And that to me is a problem. I think it's a big problem, because then when it comes back, and there's so many conversations around this, when it comes back, people are like, oh, well, that business didn't do it like this or whatever, or it wasn't that quality. And we have to think about that as Black women who are in business, ensuring that our products, are really that they bring that quality. But I think some of that comes from the fact that, like, when you run into those decision points, when you only have so many dollars, it's like, how are you going to allocate that? And does that mean that you have to wait to release your products? Does that mean you remove 2 or 3 pieces from it? And then what does that mean for the customer engagement, right?
right.
Customer experience. And so that's where, for me, I'm just like, at this point, I very much say, like, this is what we need to make this happen. Until we're there, we can't put it out, because I'm like, I can't have my name behind something that's like not together,
Not
because
together.
I don't
Yeah.
have the resources. Like,
Yeah. Yes. Yes to that. That I felt that in a whole place. Especially being a person who develops STEM curriculum for for kids. It's just like I
yeah,
don't want to put my mainly girls, but I don't want to put my name on something that I already know is not going to, stand up, right?
yeah,
Um, and even if if I've gotten funding, it's like, well, what is this amount of funding going to get you, right? And so having to make those hard decisions
yeah,
is key. And I really want, any funders who are listening to this episode to really know that, when we came to you and we said, hey, this is we think this is a great proposal. Here's what we think it has the potential to do. Here's our reach, and so on and so forth. And we're asking for X dollars. And you said, okay, that's nice, but we'll give you this. Here's
mhm,
what it means. What it means is that the quality of the curriculum that we said we were thinking about trying to do or developing, we're not going to be able to do. It takes time, effort, energy, sourcing of things to be able to put together a really good curriculum. It's not a I think people think that you like, okay, well, you put together some Legos and you just build
yeah.
something around, and it's like that's not quite how it that's not quite how it works.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, this is reminding me. I hosted this event at couple years ago. So I host something for Hour of Code, and I hosted this event at Epic, which is the electronic healthcare records system, the EHR. And we hosted it there, and we bus students, like, and we had different bus pickup points because it's a little challenging to get to that spot. But I remember when I was doing like the introduction to the event, like the Epic campus is in like the top, I think 15 campuses. Like, it's kind of Google, like there are all of these cool rooms and etc. So we were in their like cave and like icicle space. And I just remember one of the students, several students coming up to me and being like, is this is your building? This is amazing. You own this? Because they know that like I was the founder who had put it on this right? And that showed me, like, I did clarify for them, like, we're in the space, like, and I told them, like, Judy is the one who started this, epic and everything. And that just as they're seeing me in this space, like, I'm going to have an amazing space like this. And so can they. Right. And
Right.
I think there was a powerful thing about, like, going back to what you're saying, and like funding, being able to have the funding to do what you need to do because you know the impact, right?
Yes.
Because I wanted to bring them to that space for them to know about, that location as a potential employer in their future. But there was something really powerful that happened for them to be like, for them to have no question that, like, Winnie Karanja is the one who owns this massive building, right? And she works here. She leads this
Right.
massive building. So they're like, wait, Winnie Karanja, who looks like me, like, Black woman, like, so I can do that too.
So I can do that too.
And
Yes.
that's what those dollars, that's what the, hey, we're doing this in this spot, that matters. Like, everything I do has so many layers of intentionality because I'm thinking about the impact of what students are seeing, the impact of what, what we're doing for our educators. It's all about so many layers of intentionality.
Yes.
That's what makes the experience for our students that we're serving with our boxes, for our educators, for the events that we're putting on, with our curated experiences, is those levels of intentionality. Like, I hosted like this legendary celebration in Madison in July. And again, that whole panel talking about how do you create transformative spaces for women of color. It was curated on that stage, the entirety of the stage for the evening. It always had those only women of color on that stage. Only. And there was intentionality behind all of it. And to take a step back and to think how many times that you had an event where the stage and the people who are speaking are people of color.
Right.
Right. Those are my levels of intentionality because it speaks something. Right. And whether people realize that, what I'm putting together, the way that I'm wanting them to reframe their mind, their thinking, whether it becomes conscious or unconscious at that point, it's doing the work. And so I think that's where for me, it goes back to, like, believing the founders, the people who, donors are supporting, et cetera, that intentionality and the resources needed to make that intentionality a reality.
I love that. That phrasing and the work behind it, like layers of intentionality. I felt that in a place, and I know that there are other women of color doing the same thing. Like when they're putting together panels, or they're they're getting invitations to be a part of a panel, or they're walking on stages and giving keynotes and other things. They're asking those behind the scenes questions like, well, how many other women of color are is on the panel or is a part of the conference? Because it matters. It matters for us to be seen. It matters for us to be a part of these panels. It matters what topic we're discussing. It all matters because, again, there's a lot of us out here. Is that true? There are many of us out here. Let me phrase that. There are many of us out here. And what I feel like we're doing a much better job than we have in the past. We're out here, we're telling our stories, we are being intentional about the stages we step on, and the words that we speak. There's still more work to be done. Those rooms that you're in, we need more. We need more.
Yes.
And so I will say that I do, though, appreciate you, because I feel like your work and the impact of it it's impactful now, but there's the what is I want to say the trickle down effect, but not quite, right? Because I feel like those students that you've impacted, that were 10, 12, you're going to see the impact of your work when they're 18 and they're 21 and they're, so that's the part where it's just, that's the impact we want to make, right? We want to make a dent in that single digit number for Black women in STEM and we want to raise the number for women in STEM. We want to make sure that everybody's not going into life sciences, that there's some people going into technology, there's some
Yeah.
people going into mathematics and
engineering.
engineering. So, we want to make sure that we have spread the wealth as we go along the STEM spectrum. And so that's the work. That's the even, the little, when you're talking about children's development and curriculum, all of the things, it all has this effect to where, are we leading more women of color into a STEM field and making sure that they are also supported when they get there.
Exactly.
So it's good. We have to be intentional all the way along the line. It's not okay, well, I've done my part and I'm done. It's like, no, we have to make sure that we have them covered all the way.
Exactly.
Okay, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
So what's coming up next for you? What's happening in Winnie's world?
Yes, I would say there's a lot of different things that's happening. We're rolling out a couple new products in our Nikira's World line, so keep a watch there. And then with our legendary card collection, we're going to be releasing a curriculum, so that'll be available on our Represented Collective website. So those are the two things that we have going on. So really working and serving and creating products for our young kids and our educators, and then also creating content for people leaders to really build healthy and equitable teams, and to really think about what practically that looks like within their department. So those are the things that we have coming up, which I'm very excited about.
Wow, I need to check that out. We can talk about that offline now. I got a couple opportunities.
Okay.
Okay, and so I'm really excited for you, and I'm so anytime I see another woman, and especially a woman of color, I'm unapologetic about it, doing great things. I just get really excited. I've been known to do a little happy dance around this here office. No, I'm serious. Like I see when I see women winning awards or getting accolades and their, new product launches, all the things. I'm sincerely and genuinely happy for them, because I already know without really knowing the work you put in. So I'm stoked for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate support.
You are so welcome. Okay, so we have one last question, and it is the question that we ask everyone on the show. And it is, if you could travel back through time and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give her and why?
So if I could travel back in time, it depends on what age I'm traveling back to my younger self. But what I would tell my younger self is, you've got this. And remember to come home to yourself, as in just coming back to who you are. Because I grew up a third culture kid, right? Kenya, America, spent some time in the UK. So just that. And I think those two things would be the things that I would tell my younger self is, you are amazing, and don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. Don't let people sow seeds of doubt in the ideas and in how you show up. Don't let people sow seeds of doubt for who you are, because you are brilliant and amazing, and your ideas are going to change the world. So
I got chills. I love that. I love the phrasing of come home to yourself. I'm going to steal that. I'm telling you to your face. You will be hearing that again.
Yes, I am here for it. Just tag me, Dr. Anderson. We all about sharing.
I have it written down, and I'm just gonna put your name right next to it. But yes. I'm telling you now, It's gonna be used.
Yes. No, I think that's something for me the past like year or two, I've really just been sitting into that, right? And how do you ensure that you're creating a safe place, and how are you a safe place for yourself, right?
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. I love that on just so many fronts. And it actually really spoke to me and some of the things that I'm coming to the realization of. My most recent podcast at the time of this recording, I think it's entitled "You Can't Run from Yourself."
Oh,
Right, you know, because you'll always meet you.
yeah.
When you stop running, you're always going to meet you.
Yeah.
And so I talked about what that meant for me
Mm,
in this moment in time. And so, which is coincides with coming home to yourself. It's just like, right. Because
yeah.
who else is there, right?
Exactly.
At the end of the day, you have to be true to yourself. And one of the life lessons that I've always known and have kept with me is that you never lie to yourself. Like you always know, the right, the wrong, the thing, if you are in tune with your intuition and your gut and the whatever else you're going to call it, you always know.
Yeah. You do.
Yeah. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. I hope that it was an enjoyable experience for you.
I had such a wonderful conversation. I feel like I could keep talking to you for, the rest of the day. Um, but podcasts don't last that long. So,
I think they would get bored of us. They'd be like, they're still talking.
right. But yeah, no, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, this has just been wonderful. So thank you for creating space and opening your community for me to just be a part and to share and dialogue with you. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime. And I do mean that anytime. Hit me up and let me know you want to come back on. You got something else you want to talk about? I'm here for it.
I surely will.
No,
I will
I'm
take note on that.
okay. I promise you I'm here for it.
All right.
All right, you guys. So that concludes today's episode of Stimming and Stilettos. And I know you're going to walk away with plenty of nuggets and things that you can put in your pocket and use for later. Use this podcast as a resource. Hit up Winnie if you have ideas, if you want to join her team or partner with her in some way, or you know somebody who she should know. Make sure that you are reading the show notes, not just for the summary of the episode, but that's where her bio and all of her connects or contact information will be. So I'm hoping that this leads to many, 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 many good things and resources for you, Winnie. I really, really, really am. And so I will sign off by saying, you guys, I hope you're out there keeping yourselves safe until we meet again.